Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Disc Guidance segment with the 2MK team, and you may have noticed that I have some sound in the background because I'm doing the sound check myself today. Everyone else is busy. But that does not mean that we're not going to get our stream, because this bot is super simple and easy to show off, explain, and honestly to input as well. So let's jump immediately into it. I'm going really fast today, and therefore I don't always need all of the same sections, but I am going to be doing some of the recordings on stream, or rather re-recordings on stream, in order to let you see some stuff, and if you're not familiar with it, how to input these things as a generality. This is partially because this bot is one of the ones we consider useful for, let's say, beginners. And yes, it's entirely intentional that I have picked two incredibly similar Arcade costumes to be as confusing as possible. Partially because it helps demonstrate how effective it might be at certain specific things, relative to at least the base understanding of her game plan that you get from my level of skill with Arcade. This bot is basically for testing your defenses, reflexes, making sure that you know when to counter what and in what way, and help you tech throws as just demonstrated. This is honestly about the only bot you will need. Unfortunately, this game doesn't save bots between inputs, so you would have to be able to input it every time if you wanted to use it. Fortunately, this is again really easy, to the point where I'm not necessarily going to show every input. You can use it to practice better combos, which I am definitely not doing. I did it yesterday and did lots of practice on lots of things I should be doing. And I'm still working on it, which is kind of the point, to have a bot you can just do that with. Therefore, as to why she's designed this way, inspiration mostly. I often don't design bots for my own characters because their game plans are complex and can't be distilled down into one thing. But while she is still basically similar to that, the way that you can put together her moves because of the type of game it is means it still works. Similar to Under Night, where I was able to make a Seth bot that more or less functions correctly despite it. So you're definitely going to see some complex things here, but not complex enough things that if you understand this character even at a basic level, you will have a lot of problems. So, why is the bot built this way? Because I randomly came up with an Arcade bot and it worked. What is the bot for? Teaching you accuracy, understanding when to go for specific things and not, and to help you practice combos on top of that. We're not going to be having anyone else on stream today. In fact, you're not even going to get to see other characters face off here. This is just because it's going to be an Arcade mirror for the entire time. Also, I'm not entirely sure that the bot is input, let's call it perfectly at the moment, where perfectly would be... It's really effective and obvious when it's absolutely perfect, but there's also some other reasons. So, let's go. We're now in full demo mode, where she is actually doing all of her functions. And you should be able to see a lot of her game plan flowing out here, but since she's basically a rushdown character, the game plan of any given player has a lot more to do with how they've decided to get in on you than about any other specifics. Other things like rushdown defense you can handle on your own in various ways. But she does have specific ways that will help her get in and will help her control situations And you want to punish those as hard as possible to discourage the player from doing it, and because, damage. She's also a character who moves in ways that causes you to lose a lot of damage if you expect a specific thing to hit, because she often prevents it from hitting in some way. Just your combo drops because she's slightly out of position compared to a different type of character. Or she's just stressful enough that you're dropping the combo regardless. For example, there. Because I'm supposed to cancel out of that before the second hit. So, in general, we're going to go over the point system first, since I'm doing this alone today, and then some inputs, some specifics of how the input should be done, and other things you might want to look out for, but then that's it. Point system, therefore. This is on our Twitter from yesterday because it was perfect enough that the sneak peek is valid. But the explanation as to how to perfectly input it might require a little more input here. Still, they're not always explained in order either. So, since I'm going it alone, let me make sure I've got it right, rather than making something confusing. You basically want to tech her throw, but that's among the hardest things to do. You want to punish her hopping knee attack, which is very easy to do but doesn't come up very often. And you want to anti-air her with your 3C. The final thing, of course, is to practice your shield. But again, those are not in order. Technically, the first thing you want to do is punish the knee. You won't necessarily be able to get a lot of quote-unquote points this way because she just doesn't just throw out the knee in neutral for no reason. Meaning that you end up having to do other stuff to even get her to the point where the concept of punishing the knee is a thing. You will see it come up punish on the side of the screen you're on to verify that you did it correctly. And it's somewhat good to get to the point where you can do that, where you can do the combo for the punish so skillfully that you have time to check at the side of the screen whether or not it said punish. You don't have to block the move in order to punish it either. You can get points for the whiff punish of the move and count them just fine. If she's input even close to right, she will not be spamming this move so much that you have to worry about it being too easy. If she happens to do it a lot, good, just consider it okay. It's just like fighting a player who repeats themselves more than you expected them to. It helps to still be ready. The second thing you are aiming to do is shield any of her attacks, literally any. And then land the combo after, because you can't just land the shield part. If you're not great at shield combos, that's one thing that matters a lot, and you can decide what tier of combo is important to you, but the way her moves work means that quite a lot of the time, you'll end up managing the shield, but not managing the counter attack. Or if you hold the shield for too long, you'll find yourself in some problem of some kind. Getting the correct shield done, and so on. Even that, which is a good default, to just do A shield or C shield, doesn't always pay off, because she does have some situations in which she'll just beat you out. And depending on her quote-unquote mood, you'll get thrown a lot. So depending on how you've chosen to score the other side, in general with bots you count yourself getting 10 points before something else happens. In this case, it's probably fair to, if you can keep track of it, count the number of times you get thrown. since most of us can't avoid that quite enough, and if you can, just find something else to consider important. Particularly since you're supposed to be tackling the throws anyway, unlike her other hits where you really can just get hit randomly in neutral while trying to do things, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on any failure to defend on your end. Getting caught by Arcway throw is generally a sign that you wasn't paying enough attention in some way. Certainly, if it happens 10 times, you should care. After that, we have the, as mentioned, the 3C anti-air, which you can do against these as well. But she doesn't just jump constantly either. And on the harder versions of the bot, you could say, you don't get the 3C for punishing the uppercut. Like, if she were to do that over my head, I'm not getting 3C points for hitting her out of that. So you are looking for the situation where she jumped, which isn't so common. And no matter how you input the bot, it usually won't be common. She often super jumps in certain inputs and ends up over your head, making the 3C even harder to land correctly. But since she's just not going to spam jump, it's another point where you have to be really on your toes to get it. And all that extra movement makes it harder on top of it. Finally, as mentioned, for the what is functionally the hardest point, attack her throw. This is one of the things where the input matters a lot. How good the inputs are determines how often she throws you. But regardless of anything else, she is actually only going to have one input for throw. So if you're getting thrown, it's not because this is just, oh well, the bot is spamming throw a lot because it has all sorts of throw inputs. It has one. So technically your life is harder simply because it's less likely she will throw. But when she does, you will probably have been looking for something else because there's other things to be looking for. She will generally not block, and you can use this timing to punish and practice your punishes when she does throw out some big uppercut that doesn't do anything. A good way to just keep your mind in shape for both that section and the rest of it. Even though there is no point for punishing any of her uppercuts in any way, you would still probably care enough to keep your better combos going, and because she can get into those weird positions as we mentioned, it's easier to try to keep practicing that and recognize spacings where your stuff messes up. Let's therefore go quickly into the inputs themselves, and again, at some point I'm going to actually redo one or two of them just to demonstrate basic principles, since this is a bot that can be used by pretty much anyone and can be input fairly easily too. But first, I'm going to quickly go over what the inputs are without actually re-inputting any of them. So random playback is now off. You can't see the inputs. You're going to have to trust what we have on Twitter and what we will have on our website when we release it. But repeat in intervals. Her action 1 is a 5B that you charge, 2AD, basically to throw, but this will combo as a 2A when you're doing the recording, 2BC to do your moon skill, in her case an claw uppercut, and end the recording basically instantly. Like as soon as you've managed to hit 2BC, just stop immediately. The result of this, if you have managed to hold 2BC, is the thing we talk about often, first frame and edge shifting, which I will show in much more detail when I re-record this. Or apparently now, because I pressed the wrong thing. Then let's go into it. Or rather, skip over this and still come back later. Action 2 is a 2C, followed by a 4C. Make sure not to press 1 in there or she will end up doing a move, and we don't want her to do a move. This is basically a combo, but you don't actually want it to combo necessarily either. What you saw there is approximately correct. she's actually going to do the move so quickly that you won't necessarily even notice it. This has more to do with the rhythm and the timing than anything else. And this is a common thing as well. Because of the rhythm of this move and the length of the input, the 2C and 4C are always absorbed, or rather hidden, by this move's animation. Well, as long as I'm blocking it. This might not happen for your version, but it's a good sign if it does. Note similarly that as soon as I move away and that move whiffs, she immediately does a different move. It takes a little while to ever get to see her do 2C, but she does it. And this is basically a perfect input, so I don't even want to redo this one. If you get completely right, that will happen. So we put it as hidden-ish. Your aim should be to hide the 4C, to basically do the 4C so quickly after 2C that it basically doesn't even seem to combo. But the quarter circle forward into held A is the thing that does the move you've just seen. And I don't think this is perfectly done because she never jumps at all. But in the absolute perfect version of this, she should have a very small jump input put after this. You would notice it only if I let her hit me with the knee. And I can't be sure that it's actually in jump cancelling here. She might just be hitting more buttons. I think this is jump cancel though. But she's already in air, so there's no way to tell. This isn't generally too hard other than the first frame thing, which we will again discuss when we get back to Action 1. And it's fast, but it's not super difficult to do if you can generally do the rest of the moves, because the 9, the jump input at the end, isn't required. So once again, 2C, 4C, 236, i.e. quarter circle forward, A, hold that A right until the end. You might want to set it to a shoulder button if you are a controller user. And then just for a moment press up forward, 9, and end the recording there while holding A. Moving on to Action 3, it's very simple. 2A, 6, 6. You must dash this way for this to work. 2A, 6, 6, 2, 1, 4, quarter circle back, and end. This one you should always be able to test, because if it's working correctly, she will do this move, as you're seeing now. And if it's working incorrectly, she will do something else, usually a light uppercut. If you jump over her head, she normally will manage to get a different move if you ever let her do that. There we go. That has to do with the way the game buffers certain inputs. It's not vital, but it almost always works, so you don't really have to worry about it. This input is quite quick, and you might have some trouble with it if you are on stick because of the stick's requirements, but it doesn't have to be that quick. It helps to make it difficult for you to tech her throw if it's fast enough, but that's not necessarily vital to practice with, so don't worry too much. Action 4 is even simpler. You just hold down back for a moment and then hit forward, then down, then end. Technically, this one is wrong because it didn't even need to have that part. That happens because of something else I'll demonstrate later. But the reason I have to demonstrate it later is because me showing you what's about to happen doesn't help. I'll go at least this far though. If I have start dummy recording, and I should set the A button to X because X is the only button it accepts. If I hold that button at the beginning of a recording, you get this. So I'm pressing X on PlayStation. I am pressing X to use this menu option, start dummy recording, and I'm holding it. And by holding it, she does a light. In fact, while you're recording, you can see, but they go away as soon as you change, so it's not helpful. This means, when it's done this way, that the dummy treats this as having been the very first frame of input you used. This also means that if I tell you to start the recording and start without a button, you must make sure you're not holding that button at the start, which is pretty easy. You have lots of time between the pressing the button and the actual starting of the recording. To the point where I'm going to, let's see, try hitting this. So if you're paying attention to the right side of the screen right now, there was a D and then a bunch of nothing. And all we care about is that there is no A and no other direction. You can see there is no long neutral. There is a down back, and that's it. We care about this in this case because we need to hit down back as the very first input of this without either hitting A or leaving an empty space at the beginning. So this can be a little hard to time, but honestly, making recordings in this type of game for bots is always at least this difficult, so it's possibly a good place to start for other reasons as well. So, 1, 6, 2, release the 2 and end the recording. The reason you must release the 2, and it will be on our site to explain in more detail, is that if you don't release the 2, she won't have her uppercut to begin with, for the same reason. You remember for action 3, it was a 2A, but as far as the game is concerned, because of the method I just described, it does this on the very first frame. So the game never sees 2A if it tries to go from 4 into 3. It sees 2 if you were holding 2 at the end of 4, that 2 continues, it flows straight into the 2 of action 3, and it just sees a crouch A, which is somewhat a problem because we want her to uppercut. Sometimes it's not a problem because we don't want that. Action 5 is also relatively simple but difficult to do compared to most of the others. It's also not as vital. It's only important that it starts with 3B and there's a jump. In this case, we've allowed it to be very short for the sake of it. It specifically needs to be 3B for various reasons. And then you just go 9, 6, 3, 2 quickly. So you are just hitting 3B, up forward, roll to down, and in this case it's perfectly fine, if not preferred, to hold the down here, because we would not want a lot of uppercuts from this action. We want something else. When this action replays into itself, sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not at doing the thing that I want it to do, because I want it to act as a 6-3-2-3 style input. In this case, therefore, the fact that it's not doing that is slightly concerning, but I've seen the move that I wanted to get. This is one of those bots where it performs pretty well even if you can't do all of the things correctly. So I chose to show off the very imperfect version. So let's try fixing this one first. And I will admit right now, I've never actually checked whether or not this works this way, so maybe it never will. But we are going to hit 3B to start. So I am pressing B. I've just set the button, the X button, to B. And I'm going to hold that button, hold down forward, and then attempt to quickly go 9, 6, 3, 2 and end the recording. And I think that means I hit C somewhere in there. Now, part of the reason why it might not be working as intended is simply that there's something being kept up here, but it doesn't look like that. Because what we want is that. As you can see here, that input, while it is very hard to get perfect, there we go, sorta. I'm always facing off with these games that try to make it different. And therefore, will not do the down forward correctly. There we go. You can now see on that side, that would be the input we wanted. But in this case, we're doing a trick. We are putting the down forward B at the beginning of one and the 632 at the end of the same one, which means that it'll never actually do that move unless it plays from the end into the beginning. And for various other reasons, sometimes it just doesn't work at all. Even if I pay great attention to the sidebar, I've basically just confirmed, no, this doesn't do this way, at least not under this condition. Why? I don't know. It doesn't really matter though, because it does work in other ways, and that's usually good enough. There we go. Might have been speed, could be any number of things. But it's a good demonstration that this works even when you haven't done that one perfectly or fast enough. You still see that move. What it's based on is based in the many, many complicated ways that bots interact, and the many, many complicated ways that your fingers might put things in speed-wise. But understand that that's quote-unquote what's supposed to happen. If that's what's happening, great. Did I fix this one yet? Yes, I did. This one is, again, it's gotten rid of that A input that I had in it, and is just a wiggle. Three should be working. We've basically confirmed that before. We know that it starts with 2A, and we also know that it's quick enough that when it does the 214 at the end of it, followed by that 2A, it does the move. Action 2 has also been more or less verified, and I'm not doing it again, but I'm not sure it has the jump in it. And as you've possibly seen, it functions fine either way. So now here's the one that I would like to redo, because it's a good demonstration of the amount of work you can have to go through to get these right, or rather to do that easily, and to simply cap off with something to demonstrate the speed that this one is best done with. I have to set multiple buttons here for this. As a controller user, I need a chargeable 5B at the very beginning, which means I must set B to X so that I can start like that. I need A plus D, which could be anything, but in this case I choose for it to be square. I choose for it to be square because I need to make sure to force myself to let go of B when I hit this button. It does not work properly if you don't let go of B when you're hitting this A plus D. So I'm putting it as square because it would probably make me let go of X in order to hit square. And then finally I need to hit B plus C, which is already on my R1. You could put it on any shoulder button, or any button you find it easy enough to hold, but since the options button is the way we end recordings for this game, you generally want a finger free to press it. On a controller, that usually means that you want to hold buttons with the shoulder button. So back to action 1, 5B charged, followed by 2AD, which will combo as a 2A. I'll just demonstrate this now, honestly. So I'm pressing and holding B, which causes that to happen. Then I'm pressing and holding B and pressing 2AD as you can see on the side. And it causes a combo-ish strike. And then I'm going to hold B plus C. I'm already at down, I'm already holding 2, so that's fine. And I'm ending the recording that quickly, basically. I've actually forgotten how to do this, but it's super helpful. You don't want her going too high in the air if you can avoid it. It slows the rhythm, it messes with the bot, and so on. And it already takes like 50 to 60 frames for this to work. And now the final explanation is, of course, that because we were holding the 2BC until the end, the B we started with is never treated as being pressed again, meaning that the only input the game sees that is a new input is the grab, and various things that cause that to happen different ways. In fact, even the timing, the very specific small aspects of timing, indicate whether or not she will slam you downward or throw you forward and other things. Why does it work like this? I don't know, I'm sorry. It's just, as long as it continues to work this way, it's good enough. If it changes sometime in the future, we may have to update the bot to explain what to do to make it do this again, if we even need it to do this again. But think of this as your fun and practice partner, therefore. The inputs are a little rough, but not so difficult that you couldn't get used to them, certainly not compared to others. They're not very time sensitive. The worst that will happen is that they'll be a little too slow and the bot will be slightly less effective. You can always just attempt any given input again. And all of those button changes that you make, do remember that whatever your natural setup is, you have to change them back. With these general goals and some methodology for choosing whether or not it's basically over, did you do enough correctly to count it as a win? You can of course judge this however you prefer personally. Most of our bots for other games have very specific numbers for how often you must get your point, what you had to do right. Because those games have a lot more to do with meter and so on. This bot, for example, uses normal meter settings. You don't want her to have too much meter because she kind of just spams certain moves that you don't want her spamming. And it's somewhat confusing. She can, however, absolutely be used with meter set to auto-recover. The issue, if we could call it that, is 1, she will continually spam that, and 2, there are definitely times where she'll just confirm into like arc drive consistently. Depending on how you input it, some days it happens constantly and other days it doesn't happen at all. So work out on your own what you think of it. And, of course, hopefully you'll have more combo practice than me. Don't worry, of course, if you have trouble with it a lot at first, because if you were the sort of person who didn't need practice with your combos, this is not a bot you need. This is explicitly not so much a beginner bot, but one we would call the autopilot ones. You have to learn a lot of things in this game to be effective, and doing them all at once can be important. Learning that you are doing them incorrectly because of some small thing that you can consistently notice about yourself while playing can be really helpful sometimes. You can tell, oh, I was stressed, so this combo doesn't work, or I mistimed that very slightly, or my opponent was in the air, so it doesn't work the way I thought it did at all. And of course you can learn a bunch of other small interactions because she's the type of character that's good at teaching you interactions between your hitboxes and hurtboxes and that of other characters as a generality. A good example being just now when the combo I was trying to use, I don't think it actually works at that range because it takes too long for one of my moves to reach the correct space. For example. So if you want to build up skills of that type, understanding what will and will not work, making sure that all your combos are working correctly, trying not to get stressed too much, and of course remembering to switch from that to this sort of thing. If you shield correctly, you'll often end up doing your air combos as well. But that's all for today. Hopefully this is one of the most helpful bots for the future. Especially since you have to learn to block that overhead. That is an overhead. And you'll be able to make some good use of it. We'll continue to work on others in the upcoming, particularly because of the tricky characters we are starting to see in the game now. Not necessarily MASH, but like Mario did a number on a lot of things. At the end of the day though, Archwade can stand up to anyone. So let her help you to practice all of your combos, all of your various tricks so that you don't get blown up simply because you can't keep up. This has been Rillian, 142MK. You can find the inputs for this bot if you want to input it before the release on Sunday on our website. You can find that on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC. Basically look for tweets from yesterday. And along with this stream, you should be able to just quick reference. The bot itself will be released on 2-mk.org under Archwade bot as one of our MBTL or Melty bots. I'm not sure what we called it. But it's easy to navigate through that well-developed site. So check out that about 7:30 Eastern on Sunday when we release it, or maybe a little bit after if something gets delayed somehow. I don't expect that given how simple it is though. Hopefully this will be another bot you can use, especially given that this game does not save bots between. One point to note is that you can at least turn off the game, as in put the system into rest mode if you're not playing on PC, for example. And when you come back, the bot will usually still be there. So that's one way to manage it if you know you want to try again later, but don't want to leave the system on. This has been Rillian, 142MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.